Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Hope you all had a wonderful summer. I'm sure it was too short for us all. I now call to order this public hearing and, I call to order this regular meeting, that was the previous one, regular meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board. The date is August 14th, 2018, and the time is 5:05. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Board Member Beckham, will you please lead us?
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We will have a roll call starting from my far right.
Sandy Kravitz.
Allison Beckham.
Pam Kirby.
Kim Hartman. Barbara Perleberg. All board members are present, and we do have a quorum. We start with our first agenda item, approval of agenda. I do have 3 items to pull from the consent agenda item, item J, personnel action items, specifically Mary Grace Althoff resignation date. We'll be changing that in discussion. The second item is consent agenda item S, the IGA between SUSD and Page Unified School District. Also consent agenda item 5, or V, sorry, authorization for execution of agreements, contracts. Do I have any additional items that we'd like to pull from consent? No, okay. Sorry, yeah, V, I said 5, but I meant V. Did you have an additional one?
Yes, please. W.
W. And that is approval of phase 2 of upgrade and expansion of video security system, correct? Okay. W. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Thank you, Board Member Hartman. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. And we will start now with our agenda item 4 and call upon Dr. Creekard to present student and staff recognition and celebrations.
President Perleberg, we have no student or staff recognitions at this time.
I guess it's pretty early in the year for that.
Other than lots of kids showed up, well-behaved, ready to go, teachers were ready, principals were ready. It was a great opening. Yeah.
That's great news. All right, terrific. Then we'll move on to agenda item 5 and call upon Dr. Creekard to present superintendent's comments.
Thank you, President Perleberg. At this point, I just want to, excuse me, to highlight the board retreat that was held today, which was very timely in that we were able to reconfirm the organizational clarity for the district as we are moving forward. So we as a team, the cabinet and the board, reconfirmed that our core purpose remains to ensure all individual learners reach their full potential. And we wanted always to stress the all students. It's what makes us different from some of our competitors as we take all kids that come in across our threshold, and we are always ready to teach them and help them reach their full potential. And the core values that we have that help us with that purpose: responsiveness, student-focused, humble, and growth-minded. We are an educational institution. Growth-minded is huge. It means we all learn and we are all constantly learning. We are humble in that we are willing to learn. We don't believe that we know it all. We are student-focused. Without the students, we wouldn't have a district. It's all about the students' learning environment and what is best for that environment. And thirdly, it is responsiveness, that we must respond to you as community members, respond to our staff, and respond especially to the needs of our students. And what do we do? Our business definition is pretty simple. We educate. Enough said. And lastly, how will we succeed? What are the strategic anchors? They are accountability. We all must do our jobs as professionals. We expect the kids to be accountable to do their work. And we are all held accountable by our professionalism and by our relationships with one another. We have courage to do the right thing, courage to try something new if the old way doesn't work, courage to reach out to people and include them in our collaborative efforts. And lastly, as we've said before, student focus. That is an anchor. That's what we're all about. So with that, it was a full day meeting, planning the defining objectives in draft form and looking at how we're going to get to making that core purpose come alive and continually reinforcing the values and the strategic anchors. It was really a great day because of the open discussion on all of these points, because I was also pleased that our new cabinet members got to know the board and vice versa. That's important. And to see that we are all together in what we want for this district is truly important and significant. So thank you all for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our first information discussion item, agenda item 6, preliminary bond program update. Dr. Creekard will be leading that conversation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, President Perleberg. This is an important issue for us all, how we spend the bond money in the most appropriate way to what the voters voted for, as well as what is best for our students and our staff. And so we are lucky to have been able to hire a consultant who has a long history in the Valley of working with many districts through their bond issues and helping them make the best decisions. His name is Dr. Skip Brown, and Dr. Brown is here today just to give us a little preliminary look at what we're going to be looking at this fall. Dr. Skip Brown.
Now we'll see how we do with technology. Thanks, Dr. Creekard. Madam President, members of the governing board, I am in fact Skip Brown. Actually, it says Walter B. Skip Brown. The B actually stands for bond. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's a true statement. I'm delighted to be here tonight. This is my home district. The last time I was on this campus was 69 years ago when I walked across the stage and got my diploma. So anything I say wrong, I'm holding everybody personally responsible for my lack of education. My experience, I was once I finished college, I became an Army officer. I was in the Army 22 years, served both in Vietnam as well as in Europe, career. Finished my career as a lieutenant colonel promotable, and said, way too young to sit at home, so what are you going to do? I said, well, I looked for the closest thing to combat I could find. So I came into public education. I was delighted to be selected as the Director of Transportation to Paradise Valley Unified School District. And you know something? We don't appreciate those guys nearly enough. That is in fact, an interesting job. Held that for about 5 years. And then I was kicked upstairs, became the Assistant Superintendent for Support Services and Planning, where I stayed there for the remainder of my career in Paradise Valley Schools. I retired back in 2007, so for about the last 16 years, I've had several part-time jobs. One of them is a senior project manager for Valley Schools, and under that we work with membered school districts, helping them do all kinds of things, from building to buses to pretty much anything. I always called myself the Darth Vader of the school district. I didn't get around the kids too much. I'm on the other side, the buses and the food service and the transportation. I'm also sole proprietor of Brown Consulting, and I'm also adjunct faculty for Northern Arizona University. For my education, this is unusual. Usually I don't put the first part of this up, but in fact, I am a proud product of the Scottsdale School District. I went to Lolema Elementary. Does anybody even know where that is anymore? Then I went to Scottsdale High School on double sessions before we opened that brand new state-of-the-art Coronado High School, Go Dons. With the University of Arizona for a Bachelor of Arts in History. Yep, go Cats. I got a master's from Webster State University. Go Dictionaries. And my PhDs from Arizona State University in Public Administration.
Go Devils.
Go Devils. Yep, so I'm sorry. We have a bifurcated house, and I really have to fight with myself sometimes. It's kind of sad. The scope of work that I put through when I started talking with Dr. Creekard about coming in and see if I can help, or if I can add something to people, is take a look at existing data. What do we have now? What's going on? I want to take a look at maybe the stakeholders. That's always a good idea. Everybody brings something to the table. If we can sort of sort through and get a sifting of that, I'd like to find out more about it. I'd like to monitor where we are right now and examine current process for bond project management. How do we do it? And participate in meetings as required. My deliverable will be a report. I'll try to get that done in early October or earlier if the board says. We'll work to get something that makes some sense, and the timeline will be done by the 4th of October. The idea is to get through this. It's not rocket science. We can figure this out. We can kind of get together and come up with something that makes some sense, I think, I hope. That's my goal. I looked at the pre-election material, which I thought was good. I'm sure you've all seen the bifold pamphlets. Those are the basic general projects that were brought together before the election. And then I took a look at the bond pamphlet, which becomes the legal binding document for us. And we have a voter-approved, almost $230 million, $229 million. And we can do all kinds of things. This is a small print that most people don't read when they get their voter pamphlet. We can construct and renovate school buildings, purchase transportation vehicles. You can buy land. We can do all kinds of stuff. But that's not what we talked about. That wasn't the pre-election type discussions. We can do it. The bond pamphlet gives us the ability to meld and make what's best for the kids and for this school district. So it's a good document. The thing was called out that most people do read when they look at the bond pamphlet are what do we spend the money on? This is what it is right now, the capital improvements and the estimated costs for a total of $229 million. There'll be some other costs in there in terms of bond sales and some of the things to support the bond, but this is generally the thing. So my initial planning thoughts after spending exactly a week, 2 weeks, whatever, not enough time yet, is first of all, the pre-election material and bond pamphlets provide an excellent compass for the district's project. We know where we're going. There's a good promise. It looks solid. There's no obvious flaw in anything we promised so far. We looked at building life cycle costs, which is really important, not only to keep the good for the kids, but also it's also an economic thing. You don't want to, you can't. It's expensive if stuff breaks. We looked at the school learning environment was one. PE and athletics. We've already seen forward progress in some of that. Safety, security updates, and that's always a hot topic. And short of making our schools look like Florence, which I think is not what we want to do, that's a real tough one. We've got to figure that one out. Transportation and rebuilding 8 schools was brought in the pre. So the district has developed a capital planning document that's a useful tool for communications financial management. I think it's widely published, I think. It was given to me by Dennis Rayler, and it's this wonderful spreadsheet. And on the front of it is kind of a table of contents, and then it's backed up page by page, by school, by project, by money, and I just only wish I'd been smart enough to do something like that when I was doing this for a living. It's a good document. It's a good management document. It's different from what Mr. Gadd will be doing with his financial management piece, but this is a good management in terms of process and how we take a look at these things. And it's a good dashboard for the governing board to see where you are as well. The initial planning thoughts. Maintenance has been looked at and it's done a good job. You've had the FMC group come through here and look at every one of your buildings, top to bottom of all your systems. You also had Mr. Rayler do the same thing. They know pretty much what needs to be done in the school district. That's unusual, actually, and it's really good because that way you can start applying money to it. The maintenance piece of that big document, I just let it go. I think it's doing just fine. Keep you informed, make sure we know what we're doing, but I think that one looks pretty good. Transportation continue as planned. I know you've got a new transportation director. I haven't looked yet at the vehicle replacement plan. I will before I'm done, but I think that's probably on track as well. The real key is in the construction and renovation. We've got to refine the processes to enhance our transparency, our data availability, our communications, and our confidence, and get this together and find ways, the best way to do that. How do we do that that makes sense to everybody involved? I have 3 foundational values I tend to apply everything I look at, and I think they're good ones. First is efficiency. Now, this is the one that makes Jeff Gadd smile. Least cost, doing things right. Biggest bang for the buck. That's the best way to do business. The second value is effectiveness, doing the right things, the best result. Sometimes those 2 values are in direct conflict with one another. Sometimes it's too expensive to do what's best for everybody. If you could have classrooms with only 12 children, you'd do it. You can't afford it. And then the third value is equity. We have to balance efficiency and effectiveness. We need to make sure that when a child walks through a door in any classroom in this district, they have the same opportunities, the same everything that anybody else has, whether you're north, south, east, or west. And I think those are the 3. If we keep those 3 in mind, we won't get far off the track, I think. The board is the decision maker. I didn't have to say that, but I did because it felt good. It's true. No matter what, you approve every purchase order, you approve everything that comes through here. It's in your laps, and it's a big deal. So you scored at one point, and I'm not sure if there's everybody here, I think everybody's at least present, back in December, I think, of 2016, where a rubric was developed to try and help us figure out what is the order of march to renovate and rebuild these schools. And you scored that rubric, and which would be rebuilt based on the age of the building, the enrollment, the size of the school, the health of the building, and that's a big thing. That's the FMC. They went through and did a good job of that, and the life cycle costs. Those things then led you to come with the decision you made. Those are trackable, transparent, good deal. We can do that. The process worked. So you reviewed the data, you made a decision in public. But other factors you might want to think about adding to your rubric in the future, some things might be good for you. Things like enrollment trends, not just the size of the school right now, but what's it going to look like in 5 years. Is it going up, going down? And other things you might want to think about, like recruiting, retention, transportation. Some of those things could make other elements of the rubric. And we'll discuss that perhaps in my report or in a working session if you prefer in the future. Oversight. The district provides the Bond and Capital Override Oversight Committee with updated information on school constructions, classroom improvements, and other major projects funded by the approved override and bond. That's in your district website, almost verbatim. Then the idea of the committee and reviews to make sure that what we're doing is what we said we do. We stay within the line of the voters pamphlet and legal and so on. And that's I want to talk a little bit about sustainability, though. One of the things we look at is the school facilities board shows us percentage of what percentage of your capacity are using in your schools. And that's really not a very good statistic. It doesn't talk to what we want to know. The district values and support neighborhood schools. Smaller schools, while not as efficient, Mr. Gadd, may be more effective in terms of student achievement. It's a balance. Now, what about that third one? Equity. Size can affect the equity. If you get too small a school, we may not be able to provide the services to the children in those very small schools. They simply won't be able to staff it. Or those schools become a very significant cost where they're actually taking monies away from other schools. It's a balancing act. We need to talk about that. So what are our courses of action? And ours, the imperial hours, really, what are your courses of action? One, how small is too small? When does a school become not viable? That's a tough question. I've got a couple ideas, but I think that's one for discussions. How should we deal with schools with a declining enrollment? They're not too small yet, but they're heading that direction. What do we do about that? What kind of process do we need to put in place to make that make some sense? And do we anticipate overcrowding? When and where? And we might well do that. And there's some other things in there from safety and so on. So, next steps. I'm going to meet with the Bond Capital Override Oversight Committee on August 28th. And we're going to reaffirm that projects completed and underway are within the scope of the voter-approved bond pamphlet. That's the charter of that particular group. We're going to present emerging data, and that we being, now that's Mr. Railer promoting the emerging data, the data of what's going on. We'll look at school construction. We'll look at classroom improvements. We'll look at other major projects that are going on. And then we'll have an open dialogue. At that juncture, it's to find out what people are thinking. It's quite a good resource. My next steps, one, I want to continue the analysis, taking a look at how we're doing business. I want to look at strategies for reducing design and construction cost. I've looked at the last couple. There may have been ways to get a better deal. I'm not talking 50% off or something like that, or a twofer, but some kind of a better deal than perhaps we've gotten before. There's some things we can do. We need to look at protocol for getting stakeholders' input, and that's not just in this room, but also in the communities, both the parents as well as the people who live there, as well as buildings, churches, and things in the same area. How do we do that? What's the protocol? I'm going to look at our current processes, how we're doing business. I'm going to look at our projects, the scope of them, and validate project cost estimates, including inflation. I put that in there only because in some cases, we're not building prototypical schools, or at least we haven't, I think. And I think that at that point, we might want to start looking at how do we form fit a school to match the needs of that community, to make sure we don't overbuild or underbuild. I'd like to put a notional calendar out for each proposed rebuild project from conception to final completion. That notional calendar would not include a start date. The notional calendar would consider what does it take to get this thing done? How many months from month 1 to month last? Does that make sense? I think that the order of march and everything else is going to be strictly up to the people sitting on the other side of that dais. We'll review different district staffing, and I will just tell you right now, Dennis Rader's a great man. He really is. He was my director of facilities and construction over in Paradise Valley, and he's just a terrific man. I think you all know that without even being told. But unless you're going to kill that man, you better get him some help. He's got a foot in 2 canoes, and there's an old saying, a man with a foot in 2 canoes is going to get wet. So we need to make sure we get something to help Dennis out. And what makes best organizational structural sense what does that look like? We've got some ideas, and we'll make some recommendations. And I'll do all that by October 4th, or earlier if you like. What do you say? If you want it bad, that's the way you usually get it? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, that was my introduction, my initial foray into this. I've had a chance to meet and be welcomed by members of the bond override, whatever, that committee. We had a chance to talk. Thank you for the welcome. You're very, very well received. Do you have any questions, guidance, or things that I've missaid or walked down the wrong path?
Alrighty. Thank you. Let's see. Do we have any comments or questions at this point? Board Member Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and appreciate you taking on this role for us. It's important, and you're entertaining too, so it's kind of a little bit of a bonus here. Just a couple of questions for you. First, regarding, and this may not be a question for you, could be for a Dr. Creekard question, the enrollment trends. The last time I think we saw enrollment trend information was several years ago. It may have been like a 2014 report. What is the timing when we'll be getting an updated report, and how will we be going about that?
I think the thing about enrollment trends, there's actually 2 pieces. It's the historical data and then the data going forward. I think in this district, unless there's a huge block of empty land where they're going to start building like they are at Eastmark and things like that in the extreme South and East Valley, you can almost do this yourself, and it's very simple. You just get your pick a day, 10th day, 40th day, 100th day, and get the enrollment numbers from those days per grade. And a really quick assessment for 1 year is just take a look and say, are my kindergarten numbers lower than my 5th grade numbers? And we're talking about brain surgery with Meek Cleaver now. But you can look at that and maybe take it back 5 years. And I think that in this particular case, regression analysis is probably really quite appropriate for this district, unless there's some substantive change you're going to make in terms of grade levels or boundaries or something like that. So a pretty straight regression would probably give you a pretty good idea what that looks like. Going forward, there's a group called Applied Economics. Right. I think you've used them before. Mr. Bremer and his crew, I call it the gold standard. He goes out and really does it from the ground up and does a wonderful job of it. But I think in terms of the usefulness for this district, I think you could probably almost do it yourself, or if someone doesn't want to give it to me, I'll do it myself. Come up and look at the trends. That's going to tell you more about what you're doing in the next 5 years than probably a long 10-year guessed from Mr. Bremer. Does that answer your question?
Well, it does. I'm not sure I agree with that completely. I thought the applied economics information actually is useful because we're building schools for, in our district, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So really looking forward prospectively, I think, is important. And when we had the applied economics last time, it looked back, like you said, appropriately backwards and looking at current enrollment, which absolutely is predictive of the future. But it also showed very important prospective information by community. So, for example, at that time and still present, South Scottsdale is growing at a much larger pace than North Scottsdale. In the PV area, it was called, their term, aging in place, so there was actually declining. But the economics are very, very different right now, and obviously you can't project out forever, but I think that would be prudent upon us to actually invest in subject matter expertise on forecasts because we are building schools.
If I made any kind of statement that made me think I'm not a fan of applied economics, that'd be wrong, because I really am. Those guys are the gold standard for this kind of stuff in Arizona. For the near term, 2 years, I think whatever you come up with doing your little brain surgery with meat cleaver type of thing would give you probably similar data that Rick Bremer would come up with, only because it's 2 years. The shorter time frame, you could probably do it yourself, and there's no reason you couldn't do both simultaneously.
Yeah, I'm guessing though that there's probably at least some high-level data. It doesn't need to be an empirical first study. We can use existing data. I really would be interested by community to understand what does demographics, so large number household information, number of households, families per household, what that looks like. I think that's really important to see that by community. Otherwise, I do feel like we're making decisions with a meat cleaver, and that's really not what I want to be doing.
The one benefit that he certainly will give you is by community. He can also talk about enrollment trends. Back in the day when, if you were in a attendance area, you would go to that school district. Those days are gone now. And so trying to predict where that open enrollment goes to, whether it's a charter school or even to another school within the district or another school in another district, it's a little black magic. And he does that not badly. Yeah. And he can tell you exactly where they are. So it's data by you making decisions with data. And that's a question, that's a commitment the district could make. It wouldn't be a bad decision, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So to that point, that's another really important point, because there was a lot of data that referred to what was in boundary and out of boundary. So not only from a build perspective, it also enables us to look at it from a marketing perspective, to understand where we're not penetrating and how to go after that. So I think there's multiple benefits of actually getting that data that's pretty critical to the future of the district. So is it possible to get that information, or how can we get the information, and by when?
I think you'd have to contract with Applied Economics to get it. He could probably turn it pretty quickly, but I wouldn't want to speak for him.
Well,
that's pretty quick.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Gadd has already worked with Applied Economics, and although, because they are so busy, because they are the gold standard, he couldn't do a full study for us until the spring, but he said that he could do a quick turnaround on a summary and give us the information that he needed for these particular areas that we're looking for.
So this summer? Or like the past summer or future summer?
No, he will have this by October 4th.
Okay, terrific. Okay, and that would be great to actually get that in advance of a discussion, so, because it's pretty detailed information.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My second question was really around the rubric that you referenced to, that we actually created in December of, I think, 2016.
Yeah. So.
Circumstances have changed. The decisions we made then are different than maybe the decisions we'd make now. Certain schools' enrollment has increased, certain decreased, which may change them on the list. So will we be looking at a refreshed version of that on October 4th as well, or how are we going to go about that?
I think that would be exactly how we get to that point. It'll be interesting, because I think what goes into that rubric needs to be clear in everybody's mind on the board, because if you're going to score it, you own it, you need to make sure you understand it. I can make some proposals and show you what kind of data that would go into it, where you get the data from, how solid the data is, and you can make a decision. But I think yeah, redoing the rubric, decisions have been made. We're not going to just keep, blindly following down the aisle. What they say, plan is a verb, and so we want to continue to plan, and that's exactly what that would be. Take a look at, do it again, maybe add some things we didn't have before, and see if it changes the data. And then if we really want to get fancy, we could try to maybe run some sensitivity analysis, seeing if things were to change a little bit here and there, would that change the outcome of your recommendation?
Okay. So in the spirit of that, October 4th, is that a board meeting or is that a work study?
Study session.
That's a study session? Okay,
that's a
great.
study session.
Okay, so if we can
Wait,
definitely.
I'm sorry, September 4th?
Or
It's
you
our
said
regular-
October 4th.
Sorry, okay. I know.
Is a work study. Okay,
Yes.
great. So my request is that we also get this information prior to that day so that we have some time to kind of absorb it, analyze it, reflect on it, and then come prepared for a discussion around it.
Makes
Right.
sense.
Okay,
Prior.
thank you.
Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. Referring back to the report that Board Member Hartman referred to in 2014 with applied economics, if I'm remembering correctly, their logo was also on a report in 2012. And while no one from Applied Economics actually presented those reports, they were presented, and I would encourage us all to look at the 2014 report and see how accurate it was. And if it was off, I'd like to understand, before we just rubber stamp applied economics as the golden standard in the state, I'd like to understand why they believe it was off and what they have changed in their analytics to address that.
In the artillery, we used to call it should hit data and did hit data. And you want to compare the delta and find out why, because you can adjust your aim at that point using that kind of a modification. I think that probably, and I will call my good buddy Rick Bremer and tell him that's part of what he needs to present on the 4th. He needs to figure it out, saying, okay, here's what we presented, here's what actually showed up, why?
Well, and I'm going to stress this because he actually didn't present it.
No, but
it was a report that
reports.
had the applied economics.
I'm sure
logo.
he'd stand behind the report. I'd be astounded if he didn't. He's a good guy that way. He's very smart. And I think that he could come by and address. We had an interesting situation in another school, just a very small one, and there was one of their schools that should have been in decline. He predicted in decline, and they grew by like 16 or 18 kids. In a tiny district, that's a big deal. And so the superintendent and I were somewhat concerned. And so we called him up, and it turned out those 16 kids came from 2 houses. They had 2 families move in with like 8 kids apiece. And how do you predict that? I mean, that's something your best demographics won't give you that data. But it's still a question you need to ask. You predicted this. This is what came in. Why? And that's the old should hit, did hit type stuff. And you got to find out why.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I will actually give him a call and alert him that when he shows up for the 4th, he better have that data.
Thank you.
He better bring his artillery.
He will. I'll be sitting there. He'll be really anxious to make me happy. How about that?
Board Member Beckham.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for the information. I'm going to be on the other side. I sat in the community and saw these demographic studies and how they came out, and I just would say if I ever was on that board, I would never pay for one of these demographic studies. So I'm kind of on the other side of the fence. And here's the reason why. Is because Scottsdale is a mature area, and typically, but I could be wrong here, typically those demographic studies are based upon real estate and growth of real estate, and they kind of predict how many families live in these homes, and that's where they get their data. And so I don't see it as valuable if it's in the short term. I agreed with your statement, was excited to hear. I thought it was a fresh breath of fresh air that recognizing some of the disadvantages of these studies. However, if the scope of work is well defined and it is going to meet the outcomes that you're actually looking for, then I might have a different opinion. But I've heard 2 things tonight I want to have looked into. One is that the comprehensive study will not be done to the spring, and that this is I forgot the term that you used, but a lighter study. And that may be because it's doing a short term. And if it is only going to be doing the short term but for the October 4th deadline, then that isn't going to give you the information that you just requested. So I want to make sure that since there's 2 different studies being talked about, that what you're expecting is going to meet and match that October 4th study, or is really, you're talking about that more comprehensive study that would come in the springtime?
I wouldn't put words in Mr. Bremmer's mouth, but I do know he's used by a lot of the districts in this area. So those kinds of demographics, he's probably already got the district's data pretty well put together, I'm guessing. And again, please don't hold him accountable for what I'm promising. But I think he probably could at least talk intelligently about it. And one of the things that he does do that I do appreciate also, he looks at mature neighborhoods, and there's a life cycle of how kids come and go. You know, you watch the flip and flop shows or whatever on TV, and we're starting to see more of that where people are actually turning these in. See, I'm part of the problem this district has. I moved into the Laguna area. I had a child. She's graduated from high school years and years ago, and we're still there, and I will be in that house till they carry me out of it. Unfortunately, nobody with kids are going to move in until I'm gone. That's problematic, but it's also measurable, and it's also, you can also model it, and I think he could probably give you some data that way. The benefit of Mr. Bremmer, in my mind, is more the longer ranges, where you take a look at that 20 to 50 year, and again, it gets, this crystal ball is foggy as all of ours, but that's I think where his real benefit comes in. He looks at birth rates, he goes to census data, he does things that I didn't do, but the data is going to come out one way or the other, and in the short term, probably the next 6 years, either one of you are right.
Well, and I'll bring up what's also changed over the last, I'll say 6 to 10 years, is that it is no longer just based upon children being in homes in that district. It's really based upon choice.
Yes.
And I don't know how you predict that choice, and I think I mentioned that, you know, no one could have predicted the exodus that was happening at Scottsdale the last 6 years unless you had talked to the individuals to have found out why they were leaving. Yeah. And so I don't know how that's predicted. So I would be interested in knowing how he's going to predict that choice piece, that behavior piece, before that we just dived into a study.
You're right. That's very difficult, because you don't know, because you may choose today, you may not choose tomorrow, and it makes it tough. It really does.
Oh, Board Member Kravitz, did you have your light on, or you? No.
Well, I don't want to belabor the point about demographic studies. I don't think you use that term, but I think that's what we're talking about. But every time I hear the term demographic study, I get a nervous twist for precisely the reasons that Mrs. Kirby mentioned, because I've been around here long enough, maybe 3, 4 superintendents ago, where they did the demographic study that showed the great growth in Scottsdale. They were off by maybe 15 years when we devoted a lot of resources to areas that maybe should have been voted elsewhere, and we could have later on where we
I think.
So I do hope that the gentleman from Applied Economics, when he comes here, is prepared to defend his data. I'm interested in hearing, as you described, defending, you know, where the hidden misses were.
Yep. No, I think it's.
Why? Because we know for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and the economy's been going like gangbusters, and I'm sorry to sound like a Debbie Downer, but any day now, I'm just like, when's it going to drop? And are we going to be in the same boat we were 15 years ago when we thought X was going to happen and Y? So, you know, I appreciate all the work.
We need to push the plans out to 10 or more years if we can, but we understand that on a quite pragmatic basis, parents don't send their kids in classroom sets. They send everything they got. They're not waiting for a signing bonus. And so they come in and you get what you get, and you're going to have what you had. That sounds stupid. But I think that notion of what's in there right now is probably what's going to be in there next year. You can look at the delta from year to year. What's your promotion rate? Do you gain more kids on promotion, or do you lose some kids? You can do that kind of stuff that'll give you a near-term study that'll be pretty solid. If you want to know what's going out 5 to more years, to your point, then you want to start looking at birth rates and some of those mega trends that you won't see just by going from year to year in the school district. So both approaches are okay. There's nothing wrong with either one of them, and maybe set together, it may give you a better chance to make a more solid decision.
Board Member Kirby.
So thank you to my fellow board members for fleshing out why I brought up the 2014 study. And now that we're talking about long-term studies, 5, 6 years out, short-term studies, I then would encourage everyone to go pull the 2012 Applied Economics study and then look at how accurate they were of what they said was going to happen in 2013 and 2014, and look at the 2014 study and what,
Right.
I mean, it's even their 2-year. And as listen to this, the piece that quite frankly may have been missing was this choice piece. It might have been the one variable. Yes, they got households. Yes, they got birth rates. They had all of these variables. And the one that was the elephant in the room that we probably didn't really know how to measure it even back then was choice. And so that's why I'm asking, ask him to reflect on how close was he, and then to share with us where the miss was, and then how the new forecast has captured that miss.
And I think you're right, that's this amorphous X. We've got to figure out how to get that, or at least get a better guess at it, start chunking away things that aren't. And we need to be, I think we're aware now, me particularly, wasn't aware of just exactly how strongly choice would affect what's going on. I got a taste of it when I was in Paradise Valley. They opened a Catholic school right next to one of our overcrowded elementary schools, Pope John the 32nd or whatever he is. Holy cow, that went from overcrowded to a ghost town overnight. Nobody said, oh, by the way, we're leaving. They just didn't show up. And I was kind of rocked on my heels on that. Those kind of experiences you don't want to replicate if you can avoid it, I promise you.
Board Member Hartman.
Thank you. I'm not going to belabor that point anymore. I look forward to the information and absolutely want to make sure it's thorough and relevant and all that kind of stuff. The one other item I wanted to put on your list, and it's already on your list, but really putting a fine point on it, is the inflation. Cost of construction is going up significantly. It's going to continue to go up significantly. And so whatever data that we need to understand that the best we can, project that, and in addition to that, therefore, what's the recommendation? You know, if we think it's going to look like this 12 months, 24, 36 months, because it may provide insight as to how accelerated we want to be on this process, and at the same time, it's really going to be important data to be able to communicate to the community, this is the reason why we're doing this. And I'm guessing any school district with a bond is considering this, so that availability of resources is going to be another complication in this. So helping us understand that and being able to articulate that to the community, I think, is important.
It's happening right now. I mean, it's relevant all over the valley. We see it a lot. And sometimes I've heard inflationary notes as high as 20%, which is scary. The ones we see the should-hit data when I go out and look at various guaranteed maximum prices from various projects around the valley. I think we're probably looking right now, just experiential, about 5% inflation, which is still a lot higher than we're used to. I mean, it's been down to like 0 or 1. Back in the olden days, in the 1970s, I was fortunate to get a government-supported loan for my house at 9.9% back in the 70s when there was just a ton of inflation. Felt real lucky at 9.9. Nowadays, you think you're out of your mind if you took a 9.9%. So it's there, it's real, but we haven't seen it in so long, people don't believe it. And so we're looking at experiential data. I've got data from Chandler Unified, Queen Creek Unified. We're looking at Alwa Free and some of the others that are actually in construction right now and seeing what their cost per square foot is. So there's two pieces to it I want to look at when I talk about how to save money. One is what did they do to get lower cost per square foot than we did? And then secondly, how does that look for inflation? What is that going to do to us? Because we cannot budget for it. It doesn't matter. It's still going to be there. I mean, it's one of those things where you can, but it's there. So inflation is a big deal, and it could be a really big deal. So we'll have to see what that turns out to be. Or the whole place could pancake like it did, 7 or 8, 10 years ago, and we'd be back to, very low inflation. I'm not sure what I'm rooting for, frankly. I'm sitting here just sort of keeping my eyes open.
Yeah. All right. Board Member Beckham.
I also want to take the opportunity to thank you for this presentation. A couple of the things, and if you want to go back a couple of slides, I found that when you talked about next steps, when you talked about what direction you would take, I found that I could actually follow your thought process, and I want to go back to one of our core values of growth-minded. I saw that growth-minded. You took some data, you had your history, your experience, and then you gave us some conclusions and the rationale behind it. And then you kept it always moving forward into what is the next step, what am I expecting. You had timelines, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm trying to be logical and bring it together where, you know, everybody can say, this is, I see where you're coming from, I see where you've been. And in fact, there certainly will be people who don't agree, that's fine, but at least we've got a track, it's in the open, everybody can say that's how we got to where we are. And that's really valuable, in my mind.
Okay, well, great. Thank you very much. I want to just add and maybe belabor a few points that appreciate the work you're putting into this dialogue. You're kind of coming into a 10-year-old conversation, basically. So we're glad that you're here. I do expect that your research and discussions on inflation are going to increase our timeline, put us in a bit of a crunch. I think we're ready to tackle that. I would agree with the board members that, I mean, we could talk demographics all day long, but until we put the lens on of choice and demand, and do we have products that our parents and families are going to demand in certain places, that it's kind of a little bit of a waste if we don't do that as well. So I'll echo those sentiments. And I just look forward to continuing that process that we started, where the decision making and the logic and the reasoning and all the factors that are going into these choices are transparent board discussions with administration, with the community, and that's how we're making the decision, as opposed to kind of in the past where you had a recommendation from a committee and no one knows how they got there. So I very much appreciate this process, and I think we'll work hard to get there.
Thank you. I work hard to get committees, because when it goes south, I want someone in my corner when everybody comes shooting at you. It's always good to have as much friendship as you always can have. But thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Great. Board Member Beckham, you had an additional comment?
I forgot one thing, and it's because you mentioned it 2 or 3 times, is that you had said, is October 4th too late? And I just want to reiterate what Board Member Hartman said. It is too late if it's the first time that we see it. So we are expecting a report, and whether it's in draft form, prior to that, and to give us plenty of time to ask the questions, get answers, and then if you need to, you know, amend it so that it's final on the 4th, sure. Not that we're seeing it on the 4th.
Well, I'll title it Emerging Data, and I'll give you as final a look as I can. And a lot of this stuff I think is probably available pretty readily right now, so I think most of it can be pretty well done, John. Don't look at me like that, Dr. Creekard. It's not nice.
All right.
Okay.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty. Look forward to working with you. We'll move on to our next agenda, item 7, public comment. Sandra, do I have all the cards submitted? Excellent. In conformance with open meeting laws, the governing board may not discuss or take action tonight on any matters raised during public comments that are not on the agenda. However, the governing board may respond to direct criticism, ask staff to review the matter, or ask that it be placed on a future agenda. As a reminder, each speaker will have 3 minutes. Vice President Hartman and our digital timer will indicate the time with a 30-second warning. Please be prepared to close your comments and relinquish the floor at the conclusion of your time. We do ask that each speaker introduce themselves for clarity in the records. We thank you for your time and attendance here tonight and your cooperation in following the meeting protocols. Our first comment is from Michael Norton.
Good evening. President Perleberg, board members, Dr. Creekart, Sandra, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I appreciate the opportunity. I haven't been to a board meeting in quite some time. I haven't spoken in quite some time. There's been a reason. To say the least, I was a little bit disgruntled with what was going on, as were many other people. We've been through a period of incredible transition, a lot of chaos, a lot of conflict, and a lot of turnover. And I think that turnover has really defined this district for the last 2.5 to 3 years. As I listened to Skip Brown talk about the construction of the bond project tonight, I thought back to 2015 when we watched a presentation by Dave Peterson and ADM Architecture, and we knew that the enrollment information we were looking at was cooked. We were getting bad information. It was being given to us for a reason. It was being given to us to convince us to do the wrong thing. We then went through a period where Dr. Birdwell brought in Brian Robichaux, Lewis Hartwell, Laura Smith, and we've gone through another period where we knew we were being lied to. We knew that there were bad decisions being made, and we had to start over yet again. I will have been to 4 bond oversight committee meetings when I attend the meeting in August, and this will be the 4th time we have had a new leader at the bond oversight committee. It's incredibly difficult to progress when we're continuously turning over the critical management of our organization. We are running a competitive organization. We are at risk of losing more enrollment if we don't respond to the instability in our own system. We have a network of 30 service facilities where we put kids in a school every day, and we have churned the staff. We look at all the people that have left. We look at all the new people who have come in. We look at the people who have been good and bad, and right now today, we are in a real power curve mode. Since you brought Dr. Krieghardt on board, great people have joined our organization. We have good principals coming to work for us again. We have Skip Brown making one of the best presentations about construction I've ever heard in the 5-6 years that I've been attending board meetings and talking about construction. That was a more enlightening presentation than anything I've ever heard coming to these meetings. Last Thursday, you had on the agenda 2 items that caused a lot of anxiety. One item said we could hire Dr. Krieghardt and make him the interim superintendent. The other item said we could do something different and start looking for another person to lead the district. If you don't think that caused anxiety in the district, you really underestimate the amount of tension that exists. Thursday night, a petition was started. Over 1,300 people have now signed it, asking for Dr. Krieghardt to be appointed as the interim superintendent and to have his contract extended into 2019. Open letter has been sent. Please accept the public's comment. Please extend Dr. Krieghardt's comment.
Thank you. Mike Peabody.
Madam President, board members, Dr. Krieghardt, Sandra, my name is Mike Peabody, as I'm sure most of you already know. As a parent, I'd like to welcome our new families and welcome back all of our returning families to Scottsdale for the 2018-2019 season. For this school year, we must tackle so many different issues that affect all of our SUSD students. Some constant issues we face year in, year out, some brought on by the happenings of the past few years. An issue for this year, as Mr. Norton just said, is an extension of Dr. Krieghardt's contract. In his few months here, he has brought a sense of clarity and stability that the district sorely needed. So, as a parent, I implore you, as many others are going to extend his contract for this school year. As for item 3D from your special meeting, a search for an interim should not happen. We have an interim. He's a good man. We need to keep him. We could use the money from that search to improve our schools. By the way, Tonalea can use some new air conditioning. Buy books, benefit staff, or anything else to help SUSD and its students. An issue that was brought up also at the end of last school year was consolidation. That word spread through the community like wildfire. It had a very negative effect. We should not start off a school year with consolidation or talk of consolidation looming overhead. We should instead leave that topic to the next board when 2 new people will sit here behind this board. I look forward to going to the bond meetings. I look forward to Skip Brown and his presentations. They are fantastic so far. I cannot wait to talk about the cost to run a school and the populations of the schools, and Tonalea a lot, what to do with that. Buses and rebuilds and everything. Lastly, to end on a positive note, I volunteered at Tonalea K-8 today for Picture Day. I met our future architects and lawyers, future doctors, future engineers, and I was reminded of what I do. I do it for a 6th grader at Tonalea, proud Tiger family now, and an 11th grader here at Coronado. I do things for approximately 23,000 more kids, a lot I haven't met. I don't do things for recognition. I don't do things to better my position with the company or with the community. I am running for the board, not for future political career, but I am here for all of SUSD, the families, and the students. Thank you.
Nikki Torito. Nikki Torito.
Good evening, I'm Nikki Torito. Thank you for this time to speak. I am currently serving as the co-president of the Scottsdale Parent Council. We sent a letter to all of you earlier, and this is basically a restatement of that letter. After a tumultuous year, Scottsdale Parent Council is in the process of reorganization so that it can ensure the values held dearly by its founders, such as proactive inclusion, transparency, and accurate representation, are brought forth well into the future of the organization. As such, a special committee has been appointed as trustees to manage reorganization of the Articles of Incorporation, carry out the necessary filings to become designated as a 501c3 corporation, and serve as interim executive board. As a community, we've experienced a great deal of uncertainty over the last couple of years. Dr. Creekguard came out of retirement to help his former district through a challenging time. He has stated that his #1 goal is restoring trust, and with his solid experience, leadership abilities, dedication, and collaboration, is doing just that. But his work is not done yet. As the interim SPC Executive Board, we urge the members of the governing board to retain Dr. Creekguard as interim superintendent for the remainder of the 2018-2019 school year. We feel that it's imperative that Dr. Creekguard be retained in order to maintain consistency in leadership, reestablish trust, and advance SUSD goals while a national search is simultaneously being conducted for a permanent superintendent. Thank you.
Susan Hughes. Susan Hughes.
Good evening. It's really nice to see you here again, Dr. Creekguard. We appreciate having you here. Good evening, board. Sandra. I want to give a quick, I'm Dr. Susan Hughes, you guys probably already knew that. Wanted to give a quick definition, communication, because I think that was brought up at the retreat earlier today. Definition, one of the definitions of communication is imparting or exchanging of information or news. Direct communication between two countries will produce greater understanding. Another definition is means of connection between people, or in particular. There has been granted by all people concerned a severe breakdown in communication and connection between the stakeholders and the board. Silencing the SEA, the Scottsdale Parent Council, and attempts to silence individuals like teachers with fake disciplinary actions, sending letters of cease and desist to constituents, did not improve connection or communication. To date, the board has not apologized for the damage inflicted on the teachers, parents, and community. The connection will be irrevocably broken until there is a heartfelt apology. Once there is a connection, then there can be a beginning for communication. As a John Maxwell speaker and communicator, first seek to understand and then to be understood. Dr. Creekguard has met with several of us as individuals in an effort to understand. He has also met with us as the interim board for Scottsdale Parent Council. I am speaking as an individual. He has helped stabilize a ship that was sinking. Teachers were resigning, parents were moving their kids. When he came on board, that gave some stability, and people opted to stay. He deserves to have the label acting removed from his title and made interim. Lastly, do not approve the $432,268.49 to Hunt and Caraway. That's on consent agenda. Their contract was approved under fraudulent means for the personal benefit of the disgraced former superintendent. There should be a clawback and a lawsuit to recover some of the misused funds, not a payout. So please retain Dr. Creekard. He's made a difference. Thank you.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Good evening. This is always a fun experience. I put in a blue slip, but I actually think this has more to do with what was on the agenda today. And I wanted to discuss a little bit about what Dr. Brown was discussing and what you had mentioned. I don't know if you recall, but in April, THK Associates actually did present a school district enrollment analysis to this governing board. And they presented all the figures that you were asking for in demographics, looking at the high schools. Now, I don't know if that information is verifiable or if it's reliable, but it's interesting that that was something that was completely omitted in that prior discussion. Perhaps it's because you have forgotten that you paid for it, although it would seem to me that you have forgotten that you have paid for a lot of things. One thing that I do remember, though, in reviewing that specific discussion when it was presented to this board, is that you guys actually made it very clear that rebuilding schools was not enough to bring back enrollment to this district. That was in the notes. And I would agree that school choice is a problematic feature of today's environment that we have to deal with. But it's been a problematic feature of this environment for decades. What concerns me is that the vision here, to borrow words, is pretty flat and lacking. I don't know how you think looking at demographics of what exists today is really going to be beneficial in bringing people back to this school district when we have such great ineptitude in many of our departments. And it is wonderful, in my opinion, that we have Dr. Creekard, that we have Mr. Gadd, that we have Dr. Brown, people who seem quite experienced in what they're doing, and I'm hopeful that they are able to deliver on that, and that is why I support them being here today. But without actually coming up with a plan that says, look, we don't need to focus on the charter schools, we don't need to focus specifically on the demographics, we need to focus on what makes us great. That's how we bring back enrollment to this district. We have excellent teachers. We have excellent students. We can do this, but the idea that we're just going to build new schools, that we're going to, tell people that we're going to communicate better simply isn't enough. This is a systemic problem throughout our entire district. We need to think about the innovative solutions, the reasons why people come into our schools. Arts, performing arts, fine arts, computer programming, opportunity for every single student to find a place here in this district, vocational education, anything, you name it, because what we need to be selling to parents is that when you come here, you will have a spot for your child. Academic rigor to vocational education, they will be productive, hard-working members of our society. Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item 8, our consent agenda. We'll review what has been pulled. Item J, personnel action items, July 1, 18 through July 31, 18. Also, item S, approval of renewal intergovernmental agreement, IJ, between Scottsdale Unified School District and Page Unified School District. V, authorization for execution of agreements and/or contracts. W, approval of phase 2 of upgrade and expansion of video security systems. So those items are pulled. We'll discuss them separately. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended? Board Member Kirby?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right, so we'll tackle the first personnel action item. This one's very quick, I believe. Ms. Marshall, I'm looking over there. Getting confused. Ms. Marshall just confirmed that what we are changing in this agenda item is just one item. Mary Grace Althoff resignation date should be October 1st, 2018 instead of August 1st.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. So at this time then, if there's no other questions, I make a motion that we approve consent agenda item 8J, personnel action items. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Now we go to S, approval of renewal intergovernmental agreement between Scottsdale and Page. I have a note here that we've gone ahead and pulled this off because we were notified this week that Page no longer wants to use SUSD's online learning services, correct? So,
Madam President, that's correct. Paige notified us just this week, so we don't need to have you approve that IGA. Thank you.
all right. So we'll let that lie and move on to V, authorization for execution of agreements and or contracts. And was this pulled, I think, Board Member Kirby pulled this item? No.
No, you called it at the beginning.
Who called? I did, but we had a board member request V, correct? Or no?
Madam President, I received some comments asking questions about the limitations on this authorization. So I'm happy to entertain questions or help facilitate a discussion about that.
Okay, great. Is it Board Member Beckham? You had questions? Okay.
I didn't realize it was going to be pulled, so thank you very much. But I had a question on these agreements. Are any of them ever going to be over 100,000? And if they are, that they obviously then they'd follow policy and come to the board for approval. Is that a true statement? Do any of these ever go over 100,000?
Board Member Beckham, it is possible that they could be over 100,000. We do not have a hard and fast rule that everything over 100,000 comes to the board. However, you could certainly make that limitation in this authorization to say that those individuals, the CFO, assistant superintendent, superintendent, are authorized to sign agreements that are under 100,000. Another option, you could put a limitation that, as you have discussed as a board, that everything have legal review before they're authorized to sign. So you all might want to discuss some of those options.
Okay, so then I'll ask. I thought it was a policy. Is it just a policy if it's within certain categories? Because this is a different category, that if it's not over 100,000, it doesn't come to the board for approval?
I believe it's a practice and not a policy. I will double check, but I believe that's a practice and not written in your board policy.
Okay, but since it's a practice, would the individuals then adhere to the practice? Maybe I just misspoke when I said policy versus practice.
Yes, they would, but I would say that you should amend the item to specify that that's how you want it limited.
So I would like to maybe hear from, as I understand it, this is something that is routinely done every year, correct?
Yes.
And so are there instances where there are numerous contracts or agreements that are of large amounts that would be cumbersome to bring it to the board if it was 100,000? Does the threshold need to be higher than that? I'm just not familiar with what the dollar amount of these contracts and agreements are.
And I'm asking Mr. Gadd to answer that question.
Madam President, members of the board, can you hear me okay? The procurement code requires, as does board policy, that any procurement over $100,000 be board approved. So all of those transactions that exceed $100,000 will be coming to the board for approval. That's simply what we have rules that we need to follow. The contract here, typically if it's over $100,000, would be administratively signed after the board has approved it, or signed by the board if that's their preference, board president, at the time of approval. These contracts, I think that are reflected here are those that are under $100,000. Many of them are relatively routine, and that authorizes then individuals who are most familiar with that purchase transaction to sign those contracts. I think in I speak for my colleagues, that anything that appears to be involved legally with the wording, et cetera, will go to Michelle before any of us are willing to sign even those below 100,000. But it does allow us, the way it's currently written, to approve those more routine kind of items that are pretty clear as to what the intention is.
So would it be cumbersome to add any amendments with dollar amounts of 100,000, or does that become an obstacle in doing business for you? Because that's not, my goal is not to be setting up obstacles.
Certainly over $100,000 is not an issue, because, you know, the board and through the legal counsel has seen those, and they are in front of you publicly. The other ones, as I say, I think the way that we would like to operate with that is that anything that appears to need legal counsel approval is sought before any of these individuals mentioned here are approving any of those contracts. We want to protect ourselves also. And obviously, if we see something that we think could be an issue, that's going to go to district legal counsel.
Well, then I would like to propose that we amend the proposal, and maybe we can put it in the actual motion, or we can put it under the background information so it's very clear the dollar amount and the legal review that is expected from the individuals, if that's possible.
Board Member Kirby.
Thank you. I would agree, and I appreciate the comments, but there could possibly be a distinction of how we should be doing business, as in your experience, versus how this district has historically done business. And not to this current administration, I don't believe I've requested this yet, but I have requested it before, a comprehensive review of policy DJE, because there's also a component of board ratification, so which is the board approving after the fact, that in my opinion has been taken advantage of in very prior years. So I would like a comprehensive review of policy DJE, and you know, we can amend this tonight to continue to do business, but that we just revisit this $100,000 in light of a comprehensive review, just to make sure it still makes sense. Because it may or may not. I don't have a preconceived, it may or it may not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm going to add or stress the concern, Board Member Beckham, that you have, is that I make sure we're not setting up staff for just a very complicated process, their daily operations, and then suddenly, because you could not get board approval soon enough for a contract that is very routine and very necessary and just because of the timing of our meetings, you weren't able to, and that caused a problem. I mean, I guess that's my concern here tonight. If you say there's really no issue there, we know these are coming up long before, and they're rarely ever rushed in any way, then I agree. I think setting that cap for transparency is a good thing, but as long as that's assured that we're not going to be hurting daily operations by any sort of delays. Would you dare to confirm that?
President Perleberg, that's why in Cabinet, in our discussions, we stated, for our purposes at least, that the $100,000 limit, anything at $100,000 or more would go to Michelle, but not to burden her with all of those that are less than that are routine. It was that exact reason that we made that decision. Recommendation.
Okay. All right. Board Member, it's just all went off. Board Member Beckham. Okay.
Well, I would like, if there's, is there any more discussion? I'll make a motion.
All right.
Okay. So I make a motion and I don't have the exact wording right in front of me. Let's see here. Approve the authorization of execution and agreements and contracts with an amendment. And I will defer to legal counsel whether it goes in the actual motion or into the background information on the proposal, so it clarifies that Any contracts or agreements over $100,000 will go to board approval in accordance with, should I say policy or practice, procurement code, as well as legal review in accordance with procurement code. Would that be correct?
Legal review is not.
Okay, just legal review, period.
All right, do I have a second? What's that? Second. All right, all in favor? Oh, no, sorry. Board Member Kirby?
Just restate
Thanks a lot. No, so I've approved the authorization for execution of agreements and contracts as, and I am going by through the agenda and not exactly what is on that proposal, although I might have it. Do you have it?
I can read it in full if you'd like.
Okay. It is recommended that the governing board approve the chief financial officer, well, thank you, because you're right, I did not read it correctly, to execute agreements and/or contracts in addition to the superintendent and/or assistant superintendent of human resources, assistant superintendent of educational services, assistant superintendent of secondary education, and assistant superintendent of elementary education for the 2018-2019 fiscal year whenever appropriate. This authorization for agreements and contracts will be in accordance with procurement policy code and regarding legal review and give me a word, over 100 of agreements over $100,000.
All right. Board Member Kravitz still seconds.
I still second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion
Aye.
passes 5-0. All right, and then our last one, consent item W, approval of Phase 2 of upgrade and expansion of video security system. Board Member Beckham?
Is Debbie Spalding here? Or somebody from, oh, great, thank you. I believe I sent you a question so that you're familiar with it.
I'm sorry, I
hope.
didn't see it yet.
You didn't see it, okay. What I pulled it for, because I was trying to get an answer, I noticed that this is for Phase 2.
Yes.
And some of the numbers on Phase 2, I went back to Phase 1 so that I could compare them since they were kind of together in the tables. And I just noticed a discrepancy that I was trying to get a clarification on.
I actually know what discrepancy you're referring to is on the first agenda item. The number was too high. And so if you look at the costs section
on the tables?
at the top, that is the 100% accurate numbers. But the first time I did ask for too much money, but we only spent what was in the line at the top.
Okay, so just so that the public knows, I went back to Phase 1, and there was a table giving the costs of what we were approving. We approved approximately $414,000 worth of equipment, yet then when it came to Phase 2, it showed that actually the number was $323,154 and some change. Thank you for that clarification. I would then like to have, well, I guess I'm going to have to ask the question. When we, because I have never encountered this, when we approve a number and now we have discovered that it is an incorrect amount of what was approved, what is the process or procedure so that we correct it? Because that's what I would like to do.
My take would be that since we spent less money, that there's probably not a correction. Jeff, can you answer that for us? In my agenda item last May or June, we had asked for more money than we spent. But
Okay,
the number on here was correct.
Okay, so maybe what we can do here so that we have public record of it and notice of this is that when we approve today, maybe we'll put in the background information that what was approved in Phase 1, because I believe you talk about in the background what was approved, and we will say that there was a correction, and that the correction, and maybe we'll even put in where that error was, so that it'll be documented, and we'll have the correct amount of the $323,000. So therefore, the tables that are shown will agree with the narrative.
Okay, so.
I'm going to jump in here a little because this actual posting and this item can't change. I mean, now that we have what
we can't
you
change
can
the,
note. You're not.
We can do an amendment to it.
We're not going to go back. What we can do is in the minutes reflect that it was noted that we spent less money at this time, but we can't. We're not able to go. And please, Ms. Marshall, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't go back and change the board posting of this meeting, the agenda.
Well, we can because we just did it on the one we just approved. So we can do an amendment and just add the information.
But that will be reflected in the minutes of our discussion. We're not going backwards and reposting. Maybe I'm hearing you wrong.
You're saying
yes.
It's not going to show up on this. It's just going to show up in the minutes, just like
correct.
Well, that's fine.
Okay. All right.
So the phase 1 was actually 323,154 instead of the amount that was on the agenda item last.
And I just want that to be reflected.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't know how to correct it
is.
either.
Okay.
You.
All right, thank
Anything
you.
else?
Any other questions?
All right. So then at this time, do we have a motion to approve the phase 2 of upgrade and expansion of the video security project?
So moved with the amendment to be in the minutes once Debbie gives us those. Well, she's said the numbers, so she'll give them to Sandra.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kirby. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. All right. Well, that gets us to the exciting part of our meeting. Action item 9. Our first item is 9A, possible approval of contract for Dr. John Creekard. I guess we'll open up. Any questions or comments? Ms. Marshall, did you have any information or no? We'll just have a discussion. I don't think you do, but okay. So at this time, do we have any comments or do we have a motion? Okay, I'm happy to. I'm happy to make the motion, very pleased to make the motion, that we extend the acting superintendent contract with Dr. Creekard and approve tonight authorizing legal counsel to pursue the direction given in executive session regarding the contract, and that we extend his acting contract until June 30th, 2019, or until a permanent superintendent is hired. I'm hoping I reflected the conversation properly there. All right, so I've made that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Dr. Creekard, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you, President Perleberg, members of the board. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to continue with what I believe is significant action to move Scottsdale forward. I would also like to thank the community and staff for your support during these weeks. I know that comes with expectations, and I will work together with you and with the board to meet those expectations. Once again, this is about the students, this is about teaching and learning, and we will continue to be student-focused as we move forward with respect and professionalism. Thank you very much.
And I'll just add that I am very thrilled that we're going to continue moving forward, and today's discussions with the whole board and your cabinet has just, I think, really infused a lot of hope for all of us. So thank you very much. All right, so we move on to our next action item, 9B, possible approval of an interim superintendent and/or superintendent search firm. And I believe we have information regarding those search firms being presented or discussed in the recommendation, I believe.
Mr. Gadd.
Correct?
President, members of the board, I believe you received some information in the last couple of days, I guess it was yesterday as a matter of fact, that comes from the business office relative to trying to give you as much analysis as we can of the firms that responded to the search RFP 18035R, which dealt with selection of a permanent superintendent. In that packet, we provided a scoring system for the three of us who did the scoring, and all three of us were basically in concurrence in terms of who we felt would be the best firm to perform the function. There's firms, really two of them. One is very close to the other one, so I think either one of those firms could do the job. They obviously have, as you can see in the attached packet, they have quite a history of superintendent searches within the state, and that's opposed to the other two that did not have that extensive history. So we feel very comfortable in the board's discussion and selection of either two of the higher rated firms, basically Hazard and Young and McPherson and Jacobson. We believe that both of those firms can be responsive to the district in whatever way the board wants them to be.
All right. So I'll open up to questions or comments from board members. No one? None? Board Member Kirby.
Just a question for Ms. Marshall. Tonight's action is to, if you could just walk us through after tonight's action to approve the vendor, are we approving the proposal as submitted, or does that approving a vendor allow us to provide feedback on their proposal as submitted and possibly not wholesale change it, but just tweaks, etc.?
Board Member Kirby, yes, you can approve, you can choose a vendor tonight, and if you have follow-up questions or clarification on the scope of work, we can do that legwork and negotiate that with the vendor.
Okay, so as an example, just so the community kind of knows what I'm talking about, I believe one of the firms provided a Google search, the Google search on the candidates. Another firm didn't mention that, but if that were something we were interested in, we could go to the firm that didn't mention it and ask that they include that, and then we could have that conversation, of course, at what cost, et cetera.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Beckham.
As a follow-up to that question is, at what point in time would we be doing that? So tonight, would we choose a firm, and then it is, how are we going to go about relaying what we are interested in as far as scope of work or any changes that are in the proposed proposal that they gave us?
You can select a firm and you can discuss tonight as a board. Individual members can request that I follow up with the vendor on questions. We can do it either way. And then I can bring it back to you as a board at your next available meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Does that kick us down?
So it sounds like we want to pick a firm first? Or do we have discussion on?
We need to have discussion on the timing. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be, Ms. Marshall, you're going to be running point on this, correct?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to, in my head, process, if we send you our feedback on the proposal, and then it's not until our next meeting, which is August, when is that? September.
No, our August 30th is a study session.
I just want to, is
meeting.
August 30th, that's 2 weeks.
Right.
I mean, that's probably not going to set us too far behind, but it also gives us enough time to provide meaningful feedback and for you to have those conversations. So if we said as a board that we should get our feedback to you within the next 7 days, then that gives you 7 days to have that conversation with the vendor, and then at the August 30th meeting, we can hopefully firm it all up.
That's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Does that sound good?
Ms. Marshall
Board
had
Member
also
Beckham.
mentioned that we would, at this point in time, obviously we can do it afterwards, but also bring up any points that we have tonight.
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Board Member Hartman.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to thank Mr. Gadd and the selection committee in reviewing the documentation. It was very helpful, and you summarized it really well. I just wanted to identify a couple of the, can I mention the firm that kind of stood out to me, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got choose one.
All right, so I just want to share this because these are the things that stood out to me, and I think they'd be relevant from the community as well. So first of all, the criteria that you used, which I think I feel comfortable with that criteria, was 1, experience and qualifications, 2, scope of services, and 3, cost of services. So those were the 3 criteria that 3 independent people used in reviewing the data. As a result of that, the firm that stood out to me was your number 1 choice as well, which was McPherson Jacobson. And in spirit of transparency, I just wanted to share just with those that are here tonight and the community at large, some of the things that really stood out as why they seem like a good choice for us. First, McPherson and Jacobson stays current with trends in education leadership by being an active participant and presenter in many national and state education conferences. I think that's really important because we are in search of continued innovation and proactive leadership on the latest trends in public education and academic achievement, so that was helpful. Number 2, this particular firm has over 900 potential applicants currently registered with them. So there is a long success record. There's a number of years here. It's in the decades of experience, but they do have a large national database, one of the largest, to actually pursue candidates from, which was also a positive. And then in addition to that claim, they provided more data that said within the past 5 years, this firm has conducted over 200 superintendent and school administrative searches, of which are large urban multi-unified school districts, of which over 150 of these placements are still in position, which is quite a batting average, actually, based on our experience. And in those situations where searches or placement was not permanent, they actually provided additional services for free for the replacement of that candidate. And then, and there's many others, but the last point I wanted to point out is their process. It's a five-phase process, which includes establishing criteria, which is a board practice. Phase 2, stakeholder input, which is a proactive outreach to the community to get additional input into the criteria, which is community is all stakeholders, internal and external. 3, evaluation of the references and applications, which is critical to do as much background research as possible. 4, selections to be interviewed, so it's a downsizing of candidates, that there's a selection process and a committee that's put together to review those. And then phase 5, which is actually establishing performance objectives based on the criteria that was identified in the selection process. So the 5-step process seems very thorough, thoughtful, and inclusive. So those were some of the criteria that I used to feel comfortable with this particular firm.
All right. Board Member Beckham.
I also, when I was reading through it, was very impressed with McPherson and Jacobson. So I was also, it's nice to have that additional recommendation that came from the 3 individuals in the finance department. So I just, I won't, go on to say all the details, but some of the ones that you had noted, I had also noted. There are a couple things that I personally would like to add, so I'll add those later on in case, because I don't know if McPherson and Jacobson is going to be, I'll say I don't want to say the winner, be approved. But but I think that they probably gave the most comprehensive of proposals, and I appreciated that with the outline and clarity.
Board Member Kirby.
Ditto to what they said, and additionally, I picked up the phone and called one of the references that they provided, another board member, and got very positive feedback. So.
That's terrific. Board Member Kravitz.
I liked McPherson and Jacobson the best also. I, as you said, I thought they had the most comprehensive proposal. I believe in my notes I wrote they had an online survey for the community, which really struck a chord with me. And they also helped to establish performance objectives. I don't know if that was said, but so I would agree with that assessment regarding McPherson and Jacobson as well.
All right. Any additional questions or comments at this time? If not, so this agenda item, we do have, it allows us for an and or an or. So I'll ask, do I have a motion to approve an interim superintendent search? No motion? Excellent. And hearing no motion, do I have a motion to approve a permanent superintendent search?
So moved.
Yeah, you'll have to specifically name the firm.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I recommend that the governing board, let's see, how are we going to say that?
You make a motion.
I make a motion that we move to, let's see, enter into discussion. Is that how we're going to say it, Michelle? Enter into discussion regarding scope of work with McPherson and Jacobson for a permanent superintendent.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Beckham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. All right. So that moves us on to 9C, action item, Arizona School Boards Association, proposed 2019 political agenda, recommended by the Legislative Committee. What's that? Board Member Beckham.
I was wondering if we were going to provide Ms. Marshall with any recommendations we had when negotiating the scope of work, or do we do that?
I thought we had that on the 30th once.
Oh, we're going to do it on the 30th. Oh, I thought we were giving some of them tonight and then.
Yeah, right. And having a public conversation about that on the 30th is what I have marked. Okay. All right. So 9C, ASBA. Board Member Hartman and Beckham, I know you're our legislative liaisons for ASBA. Did you have any particular comments initially regarding this?
So I have not seen the political agenda. I apologize.
Oh, Board Member Kirby, absolutely.
That was actually sort of my point, in that normally when we take action, we discuss and work study. We try to have at least one work study conversation before we take action in a formal board meeting, and we haven't had the opportunity to do that. And I did see it. It was extremely lengthy, very wordy, and I think we need to approach it with some thoughtfulness, and the way to do that is to have it on a work study first.
Okay. We'll look at deadlines and make sure. Yeah. Do you know, Dr. Creekard, about we can do it on the 30th and still meet our deadline? Is that correct? Okay. Okay. So we will table this. I'm sorry, Board Member Beckham.
When I saw this, I did go ahead and call ASPA to do a clarification, because there is a little bit of a change. And the change is that what they are asking this year is that the board approve the four agenda items. So what they've done is taken the supplement, instead of having it as lengthy as it looked, the 10 pages, they consolidated it into 4 items in which the board would approve. And then there is the lengthy 5 pages, which is supplemental. Each one of those will be discussed at the assembly, but we don't vote as a whole for each one of those. So what could happen is we can vote for the 4 kind of higher level looking topics that they have. And then if anybody has any comments that they want to make on the supplemental, they could give, that we can discuss them, or we could give them to the delegate, and that delegate can bring them up in the meeting at the assembly. So it is a little different format this year, if that made sense.
As long as we get it.
And it's not going to make sense until you read through the entire packet.
All right. So we will table this agenda item until our study session on August 30th.
Yeah.
And that'll be enough time.
Yeah.
Board Member Hartman?
And send us the information in advance, whomever's appropriate.
Well, it's in board
So we
book.
can do it? Okay. That'd be great.
It's-
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
It's, the entire thing is in board books, so. All right. Then that moves us on to action item 9D, selection of delegate and alternate to the Arizona School Board Association Delegate Assembly, September 9th, 2017. Do we have any, Board Member Hartman, Beckham? Would you be interested in continuing, or is there someone else who would like to throw their name in? Board Member Hartman? Or is that from before? Sorry.
I am checking my calendar.
Okay.
I have attended and do not mind at all being a delegate. I'm just looking at what the date is. I think Board Member Beckham has done it. September 8th.
It said 9th.
9th. Okay.
Oh, sorry, it does say 8th. What did I
It's the
see?
8th.
What did I see the 9th? Oh,
Okay, it's Saturday the 8th.
Never mind. All right. Saturday, it's September
Yeah.
8th, sorry.
Okay. I am
It
out
says
of
9th.
town, so unable to attend.
Okay. Board Member Beckham.
I knew Board Member Hartman was out of town because I asked her because I was hoping she would be there. I was the alternate last year. I did watch it. So if you'd like me to be the delegate, I can be. I do suggest whoever the alternate is that they do attend, because you do learn a lot about the procedure and what happens.
All right. All right. So do we have an alternate nominee? Someone would like to step up? Well.
Could you just clarify, this is just for their political agenda for the year, this meeting?
Right.
Oh, I'll be, oh, okay, then I'll be the alternate.
September 8th?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So at this time, I will make a motion that we approve Board Member Beckham as our delegate to the Arizona School Board Association Delegate Assembly, and our alternate shall be Board Member Kravitz. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Board Member Hartman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you both. Okay, so that gets us to our future items, agenda item 10. So I do have, obviously, the negotiation for scope of work with the search for the superintendent search firm on August 30th. Do I have additional future item, agenda items request from board members? Board Member Kirby.
So as mentioned earlier, policy DJE, and I will follow up with Dr. Creekgard with more specificity on what I'm looking at there. And secondly, I would like to have a work study to discuss the selection and approval process of our curriculum and our supplemental materials.
Okay. All right, and Board Member Hartman?
This may have already been discussed, but just want to reiterate that it's on our agenda within the next couple of months, which is, Ms. Marshall, you'll have to help me with the policy reference on this, but it's the policy related to superintendent evaluation and process.
Yes, I believe that's policy CBI.
Okay, so it would be the discussion and the review, finally the approval of updated CBI policy. And then secondly, once again, Ms. Marshall, you might be able to give me the right terminology for this, but I suspect what I'm looking for is, we did some really terrific work today on vision, mission, values and strategic priorities. And I would think what we might want is a resolution once that's final. We did the groundwork today with the cabinet and with the board members. We agreed to the cabinet, along with Dr. Creekard, fine-tuning it, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and proposing something back to us in September. And to memorialize that work, I'd like to suggest that we provide a resolution once that document is ready.
That's appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Board Member Beckham.
I would also like to support that we do in a study session a curriculum and supplemental review. I would also like to, even though it was mentioned today in the retreat, to look at a communications review and look at communications resources and staffing to, with the goal of improving our internal and external communications.
All right, and Board Member Kravitz.
Some of my requests are repetitive, but I'd like to get some dates for when I can expect we'll have these discussions. A discussion and review of stipends for all extracurriculars. A discussion on the bus schedule and school start times for the 2019-20 school year. And maybe if we could do that in October, November, before December for sure. And also, I'd like a discussion and review of class fees that we charge for students and how our fees compare with other districts. I'm concerned that some of these fees may dissuade some students for taking some of the classes that we offer.
Alrighty. Okay, all right. No other items then? We'll move to our dates of upcoming meetings. Our next study session is Thursday, August 30th, 2018 at 3 p.m. at Mojave District Annex. Our next regular governing board meeting is here Tuesday, September 4th, 2018 at 5 p.m. And that moves us on to our governing board reports. Do we have it? Board Member Hartman.
Thank you. First, just wanted to really acknowledge our educators and our support staff and welcome you all back. Thank you for helping us get off to a great year along with our administrators. Look forward to it. And over the summer, there was still some really exciting things that were happening behind the scenes. Just wanted to share that with you. Two programs that many of us actually are committed to are the Coronado Success Initiative and BUS. From the CSI perspective, there's new leadership at Coronado, so just want to thank you for really stepping up to support those activities. And then secondly, on BUS, I just wanted to share with you, which is once again is Business United for Scottsdale Schools. We launched a couple of new internship programs this summer. And there's been some really tremendous success. We've had, just to give you an example of one, Nationwide, which hired 8 of our students for paid internships. 2 turned into full-time employment. Those were seniors, which come with $5,000 per year college reimbursement and tuition. So we're already seeing success, and some of our students benefit from that. Another program that will be being launched, we're kind of excited about with BUS is called, at one time we called it Dinner with the Scholars, but this time we're calling it Pizza with the Professionals. And what's really kind of fun about it is the Scottsdale Rotary has stepped up to actually meet with any SUSD high school student. We're establishing the frequency, but the first one is in September at Blaze Pizza, which is in partnership with us, for a structured but learning opportunity for our students to interface with professionals that they otherwise would not have been. So to those individuals, professionals out there in the community that would like to participate, you're more than welcome to do so. And to our students, really, it's an opportunity for us to communicate what that program looks like and what the benefits are. And hopefully there'll be long-lasting, not only learning opportunities, but professional relationships that are a result of this. So we'll share more information as it's launched, but it's beginning in September as well with some great community partners. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you. Board Member Kravitz.
I just want to give a shout out to the curriculum department, to Dr. Nance and Cheryl Redner and your team, because I leave somebody out, sorry, for the 2 days of professional development at Chaparral. I thought the organization that you brought in, just from my perspective, just did a great job, and I believe there was a lot of positive feedback from that. I also want to thank them for the 2 days of new teacher orientation at Coronado that I attended, which I also thought was very well organized. And thirdly, a thank you for bringing in Ron Clark, who I thought did a great job, and really excited in a positive way our teachers for this year. So thank you very much for all the work that you put into those events. Thank you to the teachers that attended all of those events as well. Thanks.
All right. No further comments. I do celebrate and congratulate all our staff on a great start this year. It's terrific to hear. Do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
Actually, can I?
Oh, yes.
I
Board Member Kirby.
want to add one. Is he still here? I want to thank the facilities team for the opening of not only our 2 new schools, but all of the schools, and in a fairly incredible monsoon season that happened at the same time. So yes. I want to thank them.
Yes. Could not agree more. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Board Member Kirby. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Kravitz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Good night, all.